At this point, I don't even really know what to make of the Las Vegas Raiders and kind of what's happening between the coaching staff, the front office. At this point, the two are clearly not on the same page, and now there's leaks coming out from the Las Vegas Raiders. There's guys essentially blaming one another. Now, we can just look at it at the top and say, hey, John Spytek is blaming Pete Carroll, vice versa. Pete Carroll's blaming John Spytek. But it is very, very clear that the two people in charge, right? The person in charge of the Raiders roster, the long-term building, and the guy that's in charge of coaching, they're not agreeing on so much of this stuff. And it kind of makes sense just looking back and thinking back of what the Raiders did in terms of the draft and some of the guys that they kind of brought in, as well as what the coaching staff kind of has hinted at what the coaching staff has actually done. I think the Raiders need to potentially move off of Pete Carroll at the end of this season. And I'm 100% still okay with John Spytek. I have no issue with this guy. I think he's still a good general manager. But we have a report that's essentially coming out. And this is a quote-unquote leak, right? And always keep this in mind. If Jeremy Fowler is telling us something's happening, it's because someone within the Raiders organization is leaking this information. If someone's telling us this is kind of what happened with Jax Powers-Johnson, it's because somebody is leaking this information. It could be a player, it could be a coach, it could be a general manager. And I'm going to tell you guys straight up, there was a time when I got a lot of inside information into the Raiders, and I still get some, but I usually don't leak and I usually don't put it out there. But in the past I did, and it was a player that was just telling me things, and I just put it out there, and he was cool with it. And I know there's guys right now that cover the Raiders that get information the same way. But I'm telling you guys, when information comes out, someone is leaking this. Player, coach, general manager. And there's a report that Ari is putting out. There's Ari Marov, I think I say his last name. Guy's a really good insider. And he's basically saying, the Raiders coaches and the front office weren't in agreement on the Jakobi Meyers trade. Now, this is a small part of the bigger conversation, but just to kind of read to you guys exactly what Ari is essentially saying. He's saying, just to give you guys some background information here on the Jakobi Meyers trade, there was a lot of back and forth from the front office and the coaching staff about doing that. I mean, it was just such an obvious trade candidate. Move on from him. Final year of the contract. Doesn't want to be there. The coaching staff wanted to keep him, and finally they were able to get 4 and a 6 from Jacksonville. Ari's basically putting it out there, right? He's basically saying that right now the Las Vegas Raiders coaching staff is saying, hey, we want to keep Jakobi Meyers. We want to try to win games. Even though we're 2-6 at this point, we still want to continue to try to win games. Well, the front office is kind of saying, hey, Jakobi's not going to be here in a year anyways. If we can get draft picks, it makes sense to move off of this guy. And I 100% agree with the John Spytek mindset in this situation. Now, I'm not sure exactly who's leaking this. I'm going to be honest. I think this is probably John Spytek or someone within the front office, because the move with Jakobi Meyers, the smart move was to trade him. But of course, for the coaching staff, that would not have been smart. Makes their team a little bit worse. So the fact that this leak is coming out, and again, I'm going to pair it up with a couple more leaks that have come out this past week, it's starting to make sense that the coaching staff and the general manager are not on the same page. And, thinking back, the Raiders, when you were thinking about bringing in a general manager, when you were thinking about bringing in a coach, you should have really thought this through, and you should have hired the general manager and told the general manager, you find the coach that you want for this roster. Because that doesn't seem like that's what's happened for the Raiders. Now, you guys obviously see this first report that's coming out. I want to take you guys back to October 5th, 2025. Remember, the Las Vegas Raiders tight end, Brock Bowers, hurt his PCL, and it kept him, essentially hurt. He hurt it in week 1 against the Patriots, and I think he played the next 2 or 3 weeks. But it was noticeable. He did not look good. He did not look comfortable out there. Could not run around. The guy had a brace on. And just to kind of compare apples to apples, Ricky Pearsall, the San Francisco 49ers wide receiver, also had the same injury. And the second this guy had that injury, he was pulled, he was kept out, and he sat out for like 5-6 weeks. And he just returned for his very first game this past week. Here's the thing. A PCL injury is a serious injury. It's not like, hey, I'm having shoulder soreness or I have groin soreness. A PCL is a legit injury where it impacts you as a football player. And the Raiders coaching staff, if you guys remember, kept Brock Bowers out there for 2 to 3 games. And then more than that, they finally wised up and they kept him out. But the day that they essentially ruled him out, remember, he was questionable going into that game. I forget which game it was, October 5th or 6th. He's questionable going into this game. But the morning that the Raiders ruled this guy out, they had Adam Schefter throw this tweet out there, right? They had him basically tweet this, that the Raiders, tight end Brock Bowers was playing through a PCL injury and a bone bruise on the knee that has impacted his performances, of course, per sources. And then doctors have said the only way to recover from the knee injury he suffered on opening day versus the Patriots is to rest, which Bowers has been unwilling to do. So per sources, Adam Schefter saying, keep in mind, Brock Bowers played for 2, 3, 4 weeks, was not performing well, was clearly hurt. And someone within the Raiders organization decided, hey, we don't want to take blame for what's happened with Brock Bowers and the fact that he hasn't really played well. We know it's not going to go well in the media, essentially. Given this guy had a PCL injury, we kind of forced him to play for 2 to 3 weeks. They use Adam Schefter to put this out, right? Schefter puts it out there, per sources. And essentially he's saying in this tweet that Bowers has been unwilling to rest, right? So what the coaching staff did with this tweet, and I think this is coming directly from the coaching staff. It's either Chip Kelly or it's Pete Carroll. And I would even put the blame more so on the head coach and the offense coordinator regardless. Because as a head coach, you can kind of control the narrative. You can control what actually ends up happening. If the head coach says, hey, Raheem Mostert, you don't want to play special teams, well, we're not going to activate you. We're going to keep you onto the sideline. And we'll put Zamir White out there on special teams because he's willing to do it. Which actually happened, by the way. It's a real story. Raheem Mostert did not want to play special teams, and he only voiced it once, and apparently him voicing it one time, and Pete Carroll just inactivated him for 3 straight games. It's kind of wild. But back to Brock Bowers, I think this is coming out from Pete Carroll. And again, just kind of keeping in mind, right, the report from Ari is kind of favoring the general manager. The report here is kind of favoring Pete Carroll, as at least trying to give him some sort of break that he didn't do anything wrong. When in reality, we know Brock Bowers is not coming out there and saying, hey, I want to play. I don't care. I'm not resting. Brock Bowers is young. He's an athlete. He's been taking care of his entire life. Brock Bowers, as a coach, you can tell this guy you're not playing for the next 7 weeks because of your injury, and he's going to agree with it. He can care less what ends up happening. I shouldn't say care less, but he does not, he's not the type of guy that's going to say, and most NFL players are not going to go against their coach. So again, the Raiders made this decision. A lot of us criticized the Raiders. I know I was very vocal on Twitter. And this tweet kind of just shifts the blame to Brock Bowers. You're essentially blaming the player. You're putting you're putting this on Brock. And again, it's not over. There's one more thing that I want to kind of show you guys. So most recently, we heard that Caleb Rogers was supposed to start, and he ended up not starting. And then we saw one of the worst performances ever, right, among the Raiders' offensive line. It was the worst performance I've ever watched on tape. So there were a couple people that kind of reported the same thing. So I'm going to make the assumption both of those two guys, Ted here, and there was a couple other sources, basically said the same exact thing here. According to a source with the Raiders, the staff tried to start rookie guard Caleb Rogers initially, but in practice he struggled. Charles Grant is still too raw as of right now to play. To me, this comes off, right, according to a source with the Raiders. That just tells you right away that someone within the actual Raiders team. What this reads to me is, according to Pete Carroll, the staff tried to start rookie guard Caleb Rogers. Again, we criticize this, right? Why not start Caleb Rogers? Why not put him in? Why go Jordan Meredith? Why go with Will Putnam? We criticize Pete Carroll. All of us talked about this. This isn't new to anybody that's covered the Raiders or watched Raiders content. I talk about this. I know Mitch talks about this. I know Graf talks about this. Wasted. All of us talk about this right here. Caleb Rogers should have started. And again, the coaching staff went with Will Putnam and Jordan Meredith, and it slapped them in the face. So to essentially make an excuse, to essentially try to get out of the fact that you made a bad decision, they're going to put this out there through these people, right? The staff tried to start rookie guard Caleb Rogers initially, but in practice, he struggled. Again, this reads to me the same exact way the Brock Bowers tweet kind of reads, right? The Brock Bowers tweet was that Brock Bowers did not want to essentially sit out. Brock Bowers is the one we're blaming because he wanted to play. This one, we tried starting Caleb Rogers, but he just wasn't good enough. He struggled in practice. To me, this reads as Pete Carroll's just trying to make an excuse, and I'm not buying any of this shit, to be honest with you guys. I think the Las Vegas Raiders, the head coach is obviously putting things out there, and it makes sense because he's trying to make excuses for himself. We had, there was a video, And this is just on the top of my head. There was a video in which Jamal Adams, when he came over to the Raiders, maybe like 4 weeks after he came to the Raiders, he was asked by Vegas Sports Today. They had I believe it was Mike Dixon that asked him this question. He asked Jamal Adams, how do you like playing linebacker? And Jamal Adams just straight up said, hey, I don't really like it. I'd much rather play safety. Like Jamal Adams made it clear I'd much rather play safety, but the coaching staff wants me to play linebacker. Now, I don't know who that is in the coaching staff that wants a guy to play the linebacker position, but given the fact that we're having players that are kind of being forced to do things that don't naturally feel right to them, it also just goes into the bigger picture, right? Pete Carroll's way too stuck in his way of like, this is how I want to do it. I'm against doing it this other way. I just don't like this, right? And also, with the Ari report that, hey, the coaching staff in the front office were kind of in a disagreement with the wide receiver, that kind of reads to me that the Las Vegas Raiders feel like, hey, Pete Carroll should not be here past this year. And we got to make sure to separate John Spytek from Pete Carroll. We need to make sure to make these two different entities. Right? We want to make sure John Spytek does everything right, while Pete Carroll, he's kind of been questionable at this point. We want to make sure this isn't a firing where you got to fire both guys. You can just move off of one. I think there's a real chance Pete Carroll actually does end up getting fired. At this point, I think it's possible. And I think there's a real chance the Raiders end up restarting. And they end up just saying, hey, we're going to cut ties with some of the veterans, and we're going to restart. Now, I don't think that means we're going to cut ties with guys like Maxx or Colton. I think it's guys like Jeremy Chin, guys like Jamal Adams, right? These are like 1 or 2 year type of contracts. Their scheme fits, right? Isaiah Pola-Mao is really not that good, but he's kind of brought in because of his height and size. Now, you could technically move Isaiah Pola-Mao down into the box and kind of make him like your strong safety. You just got to go out there and get a true free safety. But I also think Jeremy Chin might be better than Isaiah Pola-Mao. It's kind of debatable. You could start one and then keep the other as like the third safety kind of coming off. There's no hiding it at this point, right? The Las Vegas Raiders have really struggled in 2025. Kind of like my cell phone connection before I switched to Mint Mobile, which is today's sponsor. Look, for the average consumer, most cell phone services are basically the same. You can text people, you can call people, you can browse the internet, but why pay more when you don't need to? With Mint Mobile, you get premium wireless without the premium price tag. And this is why I've switched to Mint Mobile. Why pay more when you don't need to? Mint Mobile also gives you the option to pick how much data you want. So as someone who works from home, I don't really use a whole lot of data because I'm not going out every single day. But with Mint Mobile, they actually let me save money by picking less data. Mint also gives you the option to pay upfront for multiple months, which in essence saves you money. You can do 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. And of course, every single Mint plan does give you unlimited talk and text on the nation's largest 5G network. Now, if you're hesitant to switching phone plans because maybe you feel like, hey, I don't want to be without a phone for a day or two, trust me, Mint makes this super easy. You bring your own device, and they're going to essentially get you activated with the eSIM within minutes. They make it super straightforward and super easy to switch over to them from the comfort of your home. And of course, Mint is also going to give you a 7-day unconditional money-back guarantee to give you peace of mind. And if you guys go check out Mint Mobile right now for a limited time this holiday season, you can get 50% off premium wireless service from Mint Mobile. Lock in Mint's lowest price of the year and pay just $15 for a 3, 6, or 12-month plan. Thank you to Mint Mobile for sponsoring this channel. Let's get right back into the content. So I don't know if you guys saw this, but the Las Vegas Raiders will be playing against quarterback Sheduer Sanders, who is expected to start against the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, this is really, really, really interesting. I watched this past week's game, the Ravens against the Browns. And, watching some of that game, you kind of saw as Sheduer Sanders came in, he struggled a little bit. He struggled reading coverages. He held onto the ball too long. And then he did that one thing he always kind of does, right? Which is he'll take the snap. He doesn't like what he sees. And then he starts running backwards, right? He tries bailing and he runs backwards. Instead of stepping up and making the pass, he takes off running backwards. And I watched that and I thought about it that, hey, if you can't correct that one issue, and I don't expect him to correct it like without actually getting reps, right? I think as a quarterback, you got to take reps in the NFL, kind of recognize the game speed. And then in the offseason, you can try fixing these things. But, one of the reasons why I was against Sheduer was because of the fact that he does that, right? He doesn't step up in the pocket. He doesn't put the ball where the ball needs to go. Processing not super fast. He runs backwards too often. But he's going to have a real opportunity against the Raiders to prove that he is the guy for the Browns as they go forward. The Browns obviously came in, they had Deshaun Watson, who was obviously hurt, so he wasn't going to play. But like, they had Joe Flacco at some point. Kenny Pickett was with the Cleveland Browns, and obviously they traded Pickett. They went forward with Joe Flacco, and then they kept Dylan Gabriel and Sheduer Sanders as their backups. And Dylan Gabriel's played, I believe, like 4 or 5 games at this point. And I think Gabriel looks pretty good, right? Like, he shows a little bit of flashes. Now, I don't know if he's shown enough to say he's the long term, but I don't think he's also shown enough where I would say he's definitely not a good quarterback and definitely can't become a good quarterback. But they're now going forward to the next guy, which is going to be Sheduer Sanders. And I'm not a fan of Sheduer, to be honest with you guys. I don't think he's a good quarterback. Never liked him in the pre-draft process. And I think we're now at the point where, for the Raiders, you have a real opportunity to win this game against the Browns. Some people are going to say, probably doesn't make sense. And some people will even say this, Sheduer might come out there and throw for like 400 yards. There's a real chance it ends up happening, man. For some reason, the Raiders always just happen to struggle. But I don't think Sheduer Sanders starting automatically means the Raiders are going to win. If the Raiders want to win this game, they got to go out there and play a really good game on the offensive side. The Browns have arguably the best defense in the NFL. Myles Garrett has now had a game in which he had 4 sacks, another game in which he had 5 sacks, 9 sacks in 2 games, which is wild. And that too, I don't think Colt Miller's coming back this week, so we will still be going into this game with Stone Forsythe as that left tackle. So there's a real chance the Browns defense is going to be able to help kind of keep them in the game. I think this game is going to be a score of like 7-3, and the team that ends up making that one play on the defensive side wins this game. We'll see what Sheduer Sanders can kind of do for the Raiders, or against the Raiders. We'll see what he kind of does as a quarterback. I am excited to watch Sheduer. He had all this hype kind of coming out. Is he a good quarterback? Is he not? We'll kind of find out. But in other news for the Raiders activated quarterback Aidan from injured reserve. And I think this is phenomenal news. So if you guys did not hear this, yesterday, the Las Vegas Raiders head coach Pete Carroll actually said we're not sure if we're going to activate Aidan off injured reserve this week. And you get a 21-day window when a guy's coming back from injury. And if you don't activate him within that window, he's essentially going to be out for the rest of the season. So there was a chance that if Aidan was not activated this week, and I think the cutoff was maybe Friday, if you did not activate Aidan this week, he essentially would have been out for the rest of the season. Even if he's not hurt, he would have technically just been considered out. And now he's being activated. So Aidan back. He won't be out for the season. And this means there's a real chance Aidan plays this season for the Raiders. I don't expect Geno Smith to come out and throw for 5 touchdowns against the Browns. I just don't see that happening. They're a really, really, really good defense. I saw what they did against Lamar Jackson this past week, and Lamar's a phenomenal quarterback. I don't expect Aidan to be able to have success, given I think the Ravens have a better offensive line. They have a better set of playmakers on the offensive side, at least. Actually, that's debatable. They have 2 good tight ends. The Raiders have 2 good tight ends. Their receivers, I do think Zay Flowers is better than any of our receivers. It's 50-50. Brock Bowers is a lot better than any of those 2 tight ends. But either way, I saw Lamar Jackson struggle. I don't expect the Raiders to put up a lot of points. Could it be time that Aidan potentially comes in? And it'll also be interesting to see, if the Raiders only carry 2 quarterbacks into this game and they'll keep a 3rd quarterback as an emergency. I wonder who the 3rd quarterback's going to be. Is Aidan going to be the 3rd quarterback, or will that be Kenny Pickett? We've seen Kenny Pickett come in. The Raiders obviously traded a pick for him. I believe it was a 5th-round pick. They brought him in, obviously, because Aidan went down, but it'll be interesting to see who the number 2 quarterback for the Raiders is as we kind of go forward. I'm actually excited to watch Aidan, but also, I don't, in my brain, I don't think in terms of like the short term. I know Geno Smith has struggled, but I also remember back in preseason, Aidan struggling as well too. And also, Aidan is not very mobile, and I could just imagine what would happen if he gets behind that offensive line we played last week. If Aidan comes in against the Browns, let's just say Aidan starts against the Browns, and he has that same group of offensive linemen from last week, I don't think it would be a good thing for the Raiders. This is my personal opinion. But I am excited to see Aidan back at some point. Hopefully it's with Colt Miller healthy and JPJ potentially comes back and he's healthy. Both of those 2 guys are healthy, and then we put Aidan out there. I'd be excited to see that. I'd be excited to see what he could potentially do for the Raiders. Because at that point, at least we'll be able to see if Geno Smith is the issue or if it's more so of the offensive line and some of the receivers not being able to separate. Either way, man, we'll see what ends up happening. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you guys think the Raiders general manager and the Raiders head coach are trying to separate, or at least the general manager from the head coach? Let me know in the comments below. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.